Located at the centre of the island of Malta, the Rabat and Mdina area is an easily defendable region of strategic importance. Moreover, the abundance of water and fertile land around it has made it possible for this area to be inhabited as early as the Bronze Age period, 2400 to 700 BC, and has remained occupied ever since. The town of Melite seems to have reached a considerable size already in the Phoenician period, in which time it probably was the main administrative centre of the island. We do not really have much evidence of the structures that made up the city, but important information can be obtained from the remains that lay outside the city walls.
Archaeological evidence revealed through the excavations at the St. Paul's Catacombs revealed that this patch of land just outside the main city walls of Melite was first used through a number of surface quarries like this one here. Given the location and the stone type, it is highly possible that the stones removed from these quarries was actually used in the construction of the ancient city of Melite.
During the later Phoenician and Punic periods, around the 4th and 3rd centuries BC, the terraces created by these quarries were subsequently turned into a burial ground with hundreds of shaft and chamber tombs that are typical of this period. The areas outside the old city contain numerous clusters of tombs, forming a small cemetery. The area around St. Paul's Catacombs seems to have formed part of the largest of these cemeteries, extending throughout the entire Halbayada area, as well as the Tachai areas, thus containing hundreds of burials.
The shaft and chamber tomb was the typical tomb type used in the Maltese islands for millennia. These consisted of a deep shaft through which one could access one or two rooms. Bodies were placed in this room, together with artifacts, like prized possessions and other containers that could help the deceased through the journey to the underworld. Full body inhumations were, however, not the only way you could bury your dead.
Archaeologists working at St. Paul's Catacombs have also found out that parts of the quarries were being used to bury urns containing cremated human remains, as well as amphora being used as coffins for the bodies of infants. After the Romans arrived in Malta in 218 BC, there seems to have been very little change in the use of the area. The same tombs kept being reused, and cremation urns and amphora burials keep being practiced by the Romans till at least the 2nd century AD. It is possible that the location of this vast cemetery just outside the ancient town of Melite suited the Romans perfectly, as it followed a particular Roman law that prohibited any form of burial within the city walls. As the centuries rolled by, the cemetery grew bigger and tombs got progressively larger. However, at some point during or after the 2nd century AD, part of the cemetery seems to have lost its original importance, and a second phase of quarrying was started. This lowered the level of bedrock in one section of the original quarries, cutting through some of the old tombs in the process. It is not clear whether the cemetery kept being used after this second phase of quarrying, but it is most probable that the larger types of tombs kept being used. These tombs, with a square antechamber leading to a largish burial chamber, seem to have set the pace for the excavation of the larger catacombs that were used for the burial of the inhabitants of the island between the 4th and 8th centuries AD.
Catacombs cannot be viewed as an isolated development. On the other hand, catacombs have to be viewed as a development that was highly influenced by the culture at the time. Whereas earlier Romans preferred to be buried in family and individual tombs meant to be seen by as many passers-by as possible, late Roman and Byzantine people preferred to be buried in a group, a sort of community of the dead, thus developing the smaller shaft and chamber tombs into larger catacombs capable of holding hundreds of people at a time.
During the period of Byzantine rule of the island between the 4th and 9th centuries AD, the site seems to have kept its use of a burial ground for people of all spheres of society and religions. Indeed, the catacombs remain one of the main physical sources of information for the Byzantine period of Malta. The end of the Byzantine period saw the end of the site as a burial site. Very little evidence of use during the subsequent Muslim period survives, and the next attested use of the catacombs comes from the late medieval period, during which sections of the catacombs were transformed into small churches and, in certain occasions, oratories.
Although the site was used as a cemetery for more than 1,000 years, with thousands of people buried here, we have very little personal details. Unfortunately, none of the funerary monuments bear any inscriptions or names. One of the few instances in which we can gather some information is the lead inscription by Fufiga Galena and Curtius Diadomenus, husband and wife, who erected a tomb in the memory of Valeria. The well-deserving Valeria remains one of the few persons buried in the cemeteries of Rabat we have come to know by name.